you ever been involved with a family intervention? Or have you considered doing a family intervention? Imagine that you do a family intervention with your dad and he goes to treatment and gets help. And then a few years later, your family does an intervention with you. Welcome today to a deeply personal conversation with Andrew Schultz, who actually experienced this himself. The gift of desperation that finally visited him at the end of his addictive journey was called to question by his own family. He's a podcaster, an international speaker, and an entrepreneur. I totally enjoyed my conversation with Andrew, and we talked about a wide range of conversation, the shame, the gifts of desperation, the journey back to building strong and vibrant relationships with your family on the other side of family intervention and then rehab, and how all this has transpired over the last 10 years for Andrew. So I want you to join me in welcoming Andrew Schultz, a remarkable man. And if you're willing to come out of the shadows of stigma and shame and guilt, we've built a membership for you. Stop navigating this journey alone. Join us at voicesencourage.com/thrive. Now on to our episode.
Welcome to Thrive While Loving an Addict. And I am thrilled to have Andrew Schultz with us today. He comes through a mutual friend of ours, and he has a remarkable story. And one of the things we were talking about before we got on was he has had experiences on both sides of doing family interventions. And so he will be the first conversation that we've had around this, and I love his perspective. So we're looking forward to him sharing that, and then how he has rewoven and rebuilt the family relationships coming out the other side of his sobriety. So welcome, Andrew, who is also a podcaster, a transformational leader and speaker and businessman extraordinaire.
Mhm.
So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Grateful to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. Okay. Well, I am going to let you take it away and talk a little bit about kind of your journey, your personal journey in addiction, and then kind of shift to your dad's intervention and then your subsequent intervention several years later. So,
Yeah. Okay. Born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. Growing up, I was very blessed. I was playing sports. My dad was always coaching my sports team. We were upper middle class, went to nice schools, and I didn't realize until later on in life some of the dysfunction and some of the things, the red flags that I didn't know at the time. When I was 16 years old, I went through a lot of hardship. My best friend committed suicide. My parents got divorced. And so when I was 16 years old, I went through these traumas, all like a lot of trauma in a very short period of time.
right.
And I didn't have the tools, the healthy coping mechanisms to navigate those challenges. And what I did is I turned to alcohol and addiction. Alcoholism runs in my family. My dad was a pretty heavy drinker, and he was a high functioning alcoholic. He had started our family business when I was young. He was a driver's ed teacher and football coach, and he wanted to make more money. So he started selling coffee filters door to door to support our family, because my brother and I were being born and he wanted to make more money. And that side hustle is now our family business 52 years later. But he was a high functioning alcoholic, and that was kind of mirrored to me and modeled to me.
Sure.
And, that's what I turned to as a coping mechanism, which was not healthy. But at 16, I didn't have the tools that I do now, many years later. And so there was early on turning to alcohol, which stunted my emotional growth. Because they say once you start drinking alcohol, that's when we start growing and maturing emotionally. Throughout my formative years, it was always alcohol as a crutch when things got hard. If I broke up with a girlfriend, I turned to alcohol, and then it was drugs. But I was still, I guess high functioning. I was an excellent athlete. I played college baseball. Our college baseball team was one game away from the College World Series, and we were really good. And my dream was to play professional baseball. And I realized after college, I wasn't good enough to play. And I remember my mom said something. She's like, well, Andrew, it's time for the real world. And I was like, oh, it's like nails on a chalkboard. I was like, oh
Right.
gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had some friends in San Diego and I didn't want to be involved with the family business at that time. And so I packed up all my stuff in a U-Haul and moved out to San Diego, August 16th, 2002. And I remember, I'll remember that day forever because I remember I got out to San Diego. I was this young, thought I was tough. Like I'm gonna take the world by the storm. I'm gonna just do great things. And I remember my first day in San Diego, I'd been there a couple hours and I remember sitting on the curb and I started crying. Like it just hit me. I moved halfway across the country. I knew barely a handful of people. I didn't have a job. And it was like an aha moment where it's like, okay, it's a sink or swim moment. Like it forced me to go out and meet friends and build connections. And so that competitive spirit that I used and excelled at playing sports, I channeled it into corporate world. And I just started working my way up the corporate ladder. It worked for a long time. I was successful making okay money. And I eventually made my way to a vice president position after, 8 years with the same company. And I had the corner office, I had the vice president title, and I had all this stuff. Like I had success by society standards. I had a house.
Right.
I was married. I had, season tickets to the Chargers. I was flying first class. And like, I thought that was success. And what the truth was, I had a God-sized hole in my soul. And when that stressful job in the corporate world, again, I turned to the negative coping mechanisms of drugs and alcohol. And I started abusing Adderall and started doctor shopping. The Adderall worked for a little bit, but then I started abusing it. And, there's a reason when you go to get a prescription for Adderall or other addictive substances, they ask if you have an addiction in your family. And of course I said no, which I lied. I lied to every doctor prescription I had from 2008 to 2012 was just me lying and being dishonest just so I could get the prescription. And at one point, a high dose of Adderall, a doctor will prescribe maybe 30 milligrams a day. And I was taking upwards of 250 milligrams a day.
Wow.
I would get 2 different doctor prescriptions and I couldn't even get through 1 month with 2 different doctors, not knowing about the other one. I still couldn't get through a month. That's how bad it was. And I was drinking at night. And
isn't that a lethal level?
Yes. It is. Well, like when I tell people that and looking back, I'm very lucky that I'm still here.
Right.
Because, and of course I was manicky and I would take other things to help me sleep, like Ativan, downers to come down at night with the alcohol. And it was just this vicious cycle. I was so far away from baseline and I was just so, I was pushing people away. I was manicky at work because I was taking so much Adderall. And, needless to say, I got fired from that corporate job. And I remember, I had all this money in my account. And within a couple of years, I remember I had $160,000 in my checking account. And within, 2 years, it was all gone. And it was just my addiction. It was just more money. And it was this downward spiral. And my family had made attempts to do an intervention a few different times, but I wasn't ready. I didn't have the gift of desperation. I still had enough resources that I wasn't done killing myself. I wasn't done.
Yeah.
And so that gift of desperation, in the rooms of addiction and family members, we want to help our sick loved one. But if they don't have the gift of desperation, if they're not done, there's not much people can do. And I've lost a lot of friends over the years that weren't putting themselves in as many compromising situations as I was, and they're no longer here. And so my family, they finally did the intervention. It was April 30th, 2015. And I said yes. And the only reason I said yes in that intervention was because 6 years earlier, Christmas morning, 2009, we did an intervention for my dad.
Wow.
And at that point I was in the corporate world having a lot of success, but my dad was slowly killing himself back in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah.
And he had retired from the family business. My brother had been running it at that point, and he owned 2 bars, and his days were spent sitting on the bar stool.
Mhm.
Just his friends were the guys on the bar stools next to him,
Mhm.
slowly killing himself. One night he left his car running in his garage as he was sleeping inside. And another time he fell asleep at a red light at 1 o'clock in the morning. Other times he would hit and run other cars on the way home from the bar. And the final straw was he fell and hit his head at the bar. He tried to come into the office to talk to my brother the next day, and he had sunglasses on with a huge shiner. And my brother took a picture, texted it to me, and said, if we don't do something now, he will be dead soon.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I remember calling Betty Ford Center to see if there was a bed, to see if they had resources. And they ended up putting us in touch with an interventionist. This was my
Mm.
first experience with an intervention.
Right.
And it was, thank God, looking back, that we had somebody who had been an expert in the field who could coach us
Mhm.
on what to do to prepare for the intervention.
Yeah.
It was so key. So for people listening, to have the resources of people who are in that space, who can
Mhm.
facilitate a family gathering, family support, and coach people through what to do and how to do it. And having that
Mhm.
resource was huge.
Mhm.
And I remember he had hit his head on Thanksgiving, and in Christmas, just a month later, we did the intervention on
Mhm.
Christmas morning.
Mhm.
And I remember it was
Mhm.
a blizzard, Omaha, Nebraska. I flew back for Christmas, and there
Mhm.
was no cars on the road. Our car was the only car on the road on my way to my dad's house. It was me and my brother, sister-in-law, and high school football coach.
Mhm.
And the interventionist met us at my dad's house, and we knocked on his door, and my dad thought we were there to open Christmas presents.
Sure.
And the interventionist did all the talking. He took
Mhm.
control of the situation,
Mhm.
and we ended up putting my dad in the middle of the circle. We
Mhm.
sat around him, and we had 2 letters. The first letter that we each read, that we had written the night before and rehearsed with the interventionist.
Wow.
We had 2 letters. The first letter was, "Dad, we love you. We want you to get help."
Mhm.
The second letter was, and if he's, we read the first letter, all of
Mhm.
us. And then the second letter was only if he said no to the first letter.
Okay.
We want you to get help. Dad, we love you.
Yeah.
He said no. He doesn't want to get help. The second letter was, Dad, we love you. If you don't get help, we will not be in your life anymore. And my brother has had kids at that time. We showed the pictures of the kids, and it took 2.5 hours reading the second letter, tears, the full
Mhm.
the full spectrum of human emotions. And
Mhm.
I honestly thought it was not going to work. And
Yeah.
by the grace of God, God placed on his heart something, that glimmer, that the door opened,
Mhm.
and we had his bag packed, we had his boarding pass printed. He said yes. And Betty Ford in Palm Springs, one of the best facilities in the country, had a
Mhm.
bed open for him because we had coordinated ahead of time, thanks to the interventionist.
Mhm.
My brother got on the plane with him, gave him some drinks to calm him down. And that flight was one of the only flights that got out that day because the blizzard was so bad.
Wow.
And there was just so many things along the way that it was without a shadow of a doubt, divine
Mhm.
intervention all the way through, because everything was orchestrated just
Mhm.
enough for him to say yes, and him to go to Betty Ford. And another
Mhm.
example is his counselor at Betty Ford, Bob Newton, was a All-American football player at the University of Nebraska in the early 70s. He
What?
he got drafted to play in the NFL,
Uh-huh.
very successful NFL career. He himself was an addict, got help, got sober, and he was a counselor at Betty Ford.
Mhm.
Dad was a huge Nebraska football fan.
Mhm.
Dad was a
Mhm.
high school football coach.
Mhm.
They had the shared love of football, that his counselor was waiting for him to welcome him, to introduce himself. My dad knew him because he was such a great player.
Mhm.
And now this big guy, 6'6", 280, was now my dad's counselor, that all these stars aligned. And
Right.
he had enough willingness to
Mhm.
say yes to what a first step would look like.
Mhm.
That's right. To change his
Wow.
life.
Wow. Wow.
And that was the start of his journey in sobriety.
Mhm.
And to bring it back full circle to me,
Mm-hmm.
there's no way I would have said yes to my intervention when my family did the same exact thing. I went to Betty Ford at the same facility my dad went to. I was familiar with Betty Ford because I had worked with them to intervene for my dad and to
Right.
coordinate his care and his time there. And I went up there for family week. I had a education, a in-depth immersion for family week for all week that I was there to support my dad. So these seeds of addiction and codependency and the family environment of how everybody gets impacted, those seeds were planted 6 years earlier.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it at the time. And it just, God was placing on my heart and dropping these seeds. And of course, when they did the intervention on me, I couldn't say no because I had seen my dad say yes.
Right.
The courage it took him for him to say yes. How could I say no?
Right.
And he had shown me the way.
Wow.
He had given me permission and changed his life around. And just, it's all divine. It's just everything happened in perfect timing as I reflect back. And, to be the family member to support his, and then 6 years later to have my family support me. And the people, the doctors, the resources at Betty Ford facility, it's best in class. And it takes a community. And of course, the people along the way, all the other people in my small groups that I got to raise my hand in small group on day one and start telling the truth instead of lying. Sitting in small group and hearing stories of other addicts who I could relate to.
Right.
And the powerful message of, when another alcoholic or addict says to another, yeah, me too. And I understand. And knowing that we're not alone and we're not, that other people can have a shared experience around addiction and alcoholism and to sit in a small circle and to have that relatability is just key. And it softens the armor. We can take off the mask and start to just be honest and be willing, be vulnerable. And, those small groups early in my sobriety were setting that foundation for the rest of my life of just starting to be honest with myself and, working through, not around all the resentments and the fears and the things that I was numbing out and avoiding with drugs and alcohol because I didn't deal with the pain of all the hard things that I had been through. And drinking and drugs were but a symptom of something much.
I just think that's so important for people to understand because, I just see so much judgment around it. And that's where it stops. It's like, I'm going to judge you because you're using all you have to do is make a choice to stop. And there are moments where I have to kind of check myself at the door because that's just the symptom. Like you said, there's all this stuff below the surface, like the iceberg. And most people generally are starting at teenage years, like you said, because they don't have the coping skills. And then they've stunted their maturity and on and on. So I am super curious, Andrew, when y'all went through your dad's intervention, was there any sort of connection in your mind about your own journey?
Yes.
Okay.
It was very uncomfortable because in family week, they were talking about addiction being a family disease. It was loud and clear that I was, there was a good chance that I also was an addict. And I didn't want to look at it at the time because I was like, I got a great job. I'm making great money. I have a lot of friends. Like my life is, it's good. Like, yeah, I start drinking Friday afternoon and don't stop until Sunday night. But the seed was planted during that family week because the education, they did such a great job of explaining what addiction and the family dynamic. I couldn't not see what was right in front of me. And I just chose to ignore it and continue to do the things that I was doing because I wasn't losing anything. I had all this stuff. Like I thought that was success. And so
Right.
my life wasn't looking like my dad's.
Mhm. Well, I love how you talked about the gift of desperation. And so at some point, did you actually see your journey headed in the direction of where your dad's was when you all did the intervention for him?
Yeah. Yep. And I was honest enough with myself that I knew if I knew at the end of my life, there's a good chance my life is going to look exactly like that
Mhm.
if I don't make changes, but I wasn't uncomfortable enough. My attention it wasn't important enough at that time because I, s- I was still being, I had stuff, I had family and I had money, I had the job and, I was driving a nice car and I didn't want to see the truth, even though I knew deep down
Mm.
I wasn't ready to make changes because yeah, I didn't have the gift of desperation. I guess it's that simple for
Mm.
me. Like
Mhm.
my attention, it wasn't important enough until I lost everything.
Right, right, right.
And
And
that's why I tell people I recover loudly so others don't die quietly or suffer quietly.
wow, that's powerful.
And so I'm very transparent and open about my sobriety and my recovery because I've
Mhm.
lost so many friends along the way that they died quietly. And so how dare I not recover loudly and share my story because I don't want others to suffer like I did and
Mhm.
and just hurting myself and hurting so many other people.
Are you feeling hijacked by the chaos of your loved one's addiction? Are you experiencing sleepless nights of endless worry? It's actually time for you to break free and find the calm in your storm. There is no need to be stuck in the heartbreak, the isolation, the judgment, the shame, the desperation of your loved one's addiction. If you don't get anything else from this podcast, I want you to understand that in fact you can go from that place and you can thrive no matter what choices your loved one's making. I've been where you are, and I understand exactly how you feel. That's why I want to extend a personal invitation to you to join Voices Encouraged community. We created this safe space to give you the support and resources you need in order to be able to rise above your circumstances, get out of the hole of desperation, and actually learn to thrive in the midst of the chaos. Join the Voices Encouraged community now, and let's walk this path together so you can find true healing. With our resources and compassionate members, you'll find the strength and understanding you need to thrive. Stop navigating this journey alone. Visit voicesencouraged.com/thrive to join today. Again, that's voicesencouraged.com/thrive. We can't wait to see you there.
So I'm wondering, kind of on the other side of watching your dad in a destructive addiction himself, how was that for you loving your dad?
Difficult. I remember during family week, I was up there and I went for a run. It was February in Palm Springs, which is beautiful, snow-capped mountains. And I went for a run and on my iPod at the time, iPods, those were popular back then.
Mhm.
There was a song that came on that really hit me and it grabbed my heartstrings. And it was about the love of family. And when we get down, we get back up. And it was just all about the song was appropriate, everything that my dad was going through.
Mhm.
And I knew I was a level of fear that was very, very high that morning because I knew it was the first time in my life we were going to sit in a small group and I was going to tell my dad to his face when he's sober the impact of his drinking.
Yeah. Well,
And growing up, I had a fear of my dad, his anger. He spanked me, he yelled at me. When he gritted his teeth and was angry, I was scared.
yeah.
Yeah. I was scared of his reaction of me telling him for the first time in his life, the impact, the negative consequences and the impact his drinking had on my life.
Mhm.
I was so scared. And I remember I started crying because I was like, I had enough courage that I knew I was going to be able to stand in my truth and talk to my dad for the first time in a way I've never talked to him.
Yeah.
And we sat in that small group and I shared and it was powerful. And it started to change the dynamic of our relationship. And
Mhm.
he heard enough. He
Mhm.
had been dried out enough at that point for enough days that it got his attention.
Mhm.
And, he hasn't touched alcohol since, and he's been sober ever since that morning on Christmas 2009. And to bring it full circle, here we are, Omaha, Nebraska. I moved back here 9 months ago from San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
My brother asked me to come back and work for the family business. The family business I said no to 22 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad's health is not good. He actually just got out of ICU for 2 weeks. And we had a conversation a couple of days ago that has been long overdue, because if something happens to him, I need him to know that I forgive him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was up at the hospital a couple of days ago, and he's been struggling, and he just told me, I can't fight anymore. I'm too tired and I want to give up.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. I just want you to know that I forgive you.
Yeah.
I forgive you. And he said, for what? I said, I forgive you for all the mistakes that you've made.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to say thank you and acknowledge that, it was an opportunity to set us both free.
Right.
And if something happens, anything after that conversation, we'll both have peace. And I just wanted him to know that I forgive him. There's a reason I'm here during this season of my life, that God brought me home. And it's just for people listening. I think there's a divine timing in everything in life. And hopefully people listening, all these examples, give other people permission to believe that, hey, there is this divine timing. This season of my life is not easy. Just because we're sober doesn't mean it's all rainbows and unicorns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very challenging season of my life. And I get to show up for my family in ways I've never been able to do.
Yeah.
I've been able to be of service to my family in ways that I've never done.
Mm-hmm.
That's what sobriety and recovery, that's the gift, to be able to support and be of service to our loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all coming full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it must be a remarkable experience for you to have the opportunity.
Yes. Yes. And it remarkable opportunity it's appropriate that it's absolutely an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it feels like a challenge, or something I don't want to do it. I just want to be honest. I don't want to do it. I would rather not.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I need to do it
Mm-hmm.
for my own family, for my kids, for the next generation, for generations of Schultz men, for years to come. And it's breaking the cycle of addiction, to be transformational one in our families, to raise our hand and say, this is not what I want for my future. And to have compassion for our loved ones that went, who have went before us, having compassion for them, and still creating new healthy ways of being, to embody that. And it takes, sometimes I'm like, God, why me? Why am I the one that has to do this?
Sure.
But, and it's a remarkable opportunity.
Well, and the reverberation and the ripple effects off of your willingness to do this, again, is way beyond your family. And so what I think about, Andrew, is, and I've talked about this before, is just this notion of, when you love deeply, this is where we find ourselves, because there's always going to be passings, and there are always going to be painful moments. You can't have loving deeply without that part of it. And I know that in my own journey with my son, and coming to clarity around it was so important, to be able to love him so deeply that I could be a witness and participate in the healthiest way possible in his addiction journey.
Absolutely. Loving deeply. And I didn't have the capacity to love deeply before, because I was mired in addiction and a downward spiral. It's a vicious cycle. The shame of knowing I'm drinking and drugging excessively, and then not wanting to feel that shame, And so what do? I drink and drug more because I don't want to feel that shame.
Right.
And then the next day when I wake up, of course, I have more shame because,
Mhm.
and there's this vicious cycle. And the best part is with sobriety, in recovery, with support of others,
Right.
because it takes a village. We cannot do this alone. I cannot stress that enough for people listening. It takes so many people
Mhm.
to help me get to where I am over the last 9 years. It has taken a village. And
Mhm.
this is not something, it's mine. It's something that it's a shared experience for many, many
Mhm.
people who have contributed.
Mhm.
And it's creating upward cycles instead of
Mhm.
vicious cycles, creating new ways of being that's an upward positive cycle. And
Mhm.
it's being of service. It's, getting 8 hours of sleep. It's going to support 12-step meetings if that's the preference, which part
Mhm.
of my journey, AA
Mhm.
was a big part of my journey.
Yeah.
It's working out. It's taking care of ourselves in ways that we might not have before. It's
Right.
having a group of friends that we can rely on and do life with and be vulnerable with and be honest with, especially as men, because we are lone wolves,
Mhm.
type A, trying to do everything on our own, not asking for help, say we're just fine. And there's never been more pressures on men than there are today to be leaders of ourselves, our families, our communities, our businesses, to have emotional capacity and intelligence to show up in those relationships in ways
Mhm.
that when we were just hunters and gatherers, we just needed to
Mhm.
kill food and provide enough food for our family.
Mhm.
And so it's so important, which is why I love mentoring young men
Mhm.
to just to give men permission to find their tribe. There are 2 to 3 to 5 people. If it's
Right.
a book club, if it's a men's group, if it's
Mhm.
a church group, to have a group of people that you can lean on, who can
Mhm.
support you and hold you accountable, and you can support and hold them accountable.
Mhm.
It is more important now than ever before that we do this in community and having
Mhm.
intimate connections with loved ones who can help us continue to thrive amidst the chaos.
Yes, absolutely. And the same is true for us that are the loved ones. Is I have 4 different communities that have held me, loved me, supported me, and been there for me throughout this entire experience with Sam. And I could never have done it without them. I think in some weird kind of way, this disease is bringing us back to our roots as human beings because we are
100%.
made to be in community in ways that are vulnerable and genuine and authentic and bringing our unique gifts to the community and serving each other.
Yes, absolutely. And the addiction is disconnection.
Mm.
Opposite of addiction is connection.
Right.
And so it has been the greatest gift that I've been given
Hmm.
is the addiction that I've been through. I wouldn't change it for the world, and there's no regrets because it got me exactly to where I am today.
Hmm.
And I always say, my mess, our mess is now our message.
Exactly.
Our rock bottom and darkest hour is now our greatest asset and our brightest light and our superpower to help others who are going through something similar,
Hmm.
and to create a roadmap for others to know that they're not alone, and there are things that, we can do to change our life, and that addiction doesn't define us. And it created a sense of community that I didn't even know I needed. And
Right.
community is, especially after COVID, it's,
Hmm. Hmm.
I think people are understanding, the experiences and memories and friendships at the end of the day are all the things that matter, and the stuff, what we do for work and all
Hmm.
the material stuff that we can't
Hmm.
take with us when we die.
Hmm.
I think, man, the things that are important.
Yeah. Well, I like to think that when it feels like our life is falling apart, it's actually falling together. And we have these moments in our lives that can bring us to our knees, but those are the moments where we get to rise to another level of consciousness and another level of connection and authenticity. And transcend and include our life experiences to inform and influence who we continue to become and how we, how we are in the world.
Absolutely. And for
Mhm.
people listening, if it doesn't have to be addiction. If it's,
Mhm.
it can be cancer, it can be divorce, it can be poor health, it can be any really challenging circumstance in our lives that replacing addiction with a challenging experience. And, the roadmap is very similar that,
Mhm.
the sense of community and to be of service to each other, knowing that we're not alone, I think is very appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to revisit. You had brought up shame a little earlier, and it's so prevalent on both sides of the aisle. Um, could you speak a little bit about your journey out of your shame?
Mm. Well, I think the first thing for people listening that I didn't know until, I went through, I was at a workshop, a codependency workshop in treatment. And
Hmm.
they did a great job with just educating us on codependency and, shame. And I remember they said, the difference between shame and guilt is, guilt is I did bad. Shame is I am bad. And I was like, whoa, I have shame. Like I remember hearing that. I was like, yep, shame, not guilt and shame. Like I am a bad person,
Right.
not worthy of, success and love. And that was the story I was telling myself, like I'm not worthy of it. And
Hmm.
that is that's a dark place to be. That I am bad. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve love. That was the story that I was telling myself for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think shining the light of awareness on it is the
Yes.
first step for me
Hmm.
to raise my hand in small group and be like, I'm experiencing a lot of shame. I'm feeling a lot of shame in my life right now.
Hmm.
And just raising my hand and being honest and just sharing what I'm feeling and
Hmm.
getting in touch with what I'm feeling.
Hmm.
As for so many years, like I was cut off from the neck down.
Right.
Like I was so disconnected. I didn't know what I was feeling because I was so, because I had been using drugs and alcohol for so long that
Hmm.
there was no connection with mind, body, or spirit. And if you ask me how I was feeling or what I was feeling or what emotions I was experiencing, I would not be able to tell you. And even in sobriety early on, I struggled with telling you how I felt. And I remember our facilitator, she gave us all a list of feeling words.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I was like, I would have to look at the cheat sheet, like I am feeling, and then pick one because I didn't know what I was feeling. So I'd have to look at the cheat sheet and then I'd be able to share, hey, I'm feeling shame.
Hmm.
And then, the beauty of 12 steps, Alcoholics Anonymous, 12 steps, the 12 step um, uh, context, the blueprint, the, what do you call it? The construction, the scaffolding,
Yeah.
scaffolding of 12 steps. It's not just for AA. The 12 steps in a deep personal inventory has been around for thousands and thousands of years. So fortunately, I had access to it in Alcoholics Anonymous and doing a thorough inventory of our life,
Yeah.
12 steps to go through the 12 steps and to share with another man. We call it a sponsor,
Mhm.
the rooms of addiction in 12 step work to work with a sponsor. If I'm a man, I find another man who can take me through the steps. I can read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with, and who can help answer questions, who can coach me, who can mentor me, and who I can trust and be
Right.
vulnerable with and honest with, and who's going to keep it confidential that I'm for the first time in my life sharing things about my life that I've never told anybody.
Hmm. Right.
Darkest secrets, the trauma, the things that I just can't imagine I would ever tell another person because I was
Hmm.
just so shameful about.
Hmm. Hmm.
I remember sharing with another man for the first time and how much freedom there was in just me sharing my deepest, darkest secrets,
Hmm.
the stuff that I don't want to share with anybody that I just felt so icky about.
Hmm.
I remember sharing with another man for the
Hmm.
first time and for him to say, yeah, me too. I understand.
Hmm.
I was like, you understand? Really?
Yeah. You too.
I thought I was,
Hmm. Yeah.
I thought I was the only one that had experienced
Hmm.
anything like that. And
Hmm.
for him give me permission to be like, yeah, it might not be exactly the same circumstance or experience that he had, but he can relate because he had a similar shared experience.
Mm.
So the shame, to bring your question to the answer full circle,
Mhm.
in the light of awareness, raising my hand, talking about it, working through steps,
Right.
personal inventory where I'm writing down my deepest, darkest secrets in a journal, sharing them with another man, and it's transmuting that energy, which had been intangible, roaming around in my brain for so long.
Right. Right.
And I'm transmuting that energy and starting to heal by sharing it and verbalize it and write it. And that's where the healing starts.
Mm.
I always call it an emotional bag of poo that we start to work through it, not around it. There's the only way to get through it is to go through it head
Right.
on. And that's what I did. And that's how I started to work through my own shame. And then after I went through the steps, I started working with other men that I would take them through the 12 steps and get to hold up a mirror and share my experiences with them. And that's how it's the ripple effect. It's paying it forward. It's being of service after somebody helps us, then we help them. And then
Right.
these ripple effects of positivity and love and connection and being of service to each other. And that's the best part about this thing. It just, it's creating positive ripples, and that shame was very powerful. And is it completely gone? Do I still struggle with it? Absolutely. It's I have the resources and tools to know when it comes up, like how to work through it, and know that a lot of other people are experiencing similar challenges in their own life, and always coming back to self-compassion and self-love, because a lot of people, like, I just for so long beat myself up and just the negative self-talk, and just having a little bit more compassion for ourselves.
Yeah, so well said. And that's, true on our side of the equation too, or my side of the equation as a loved one, is the same. It's the same navigation in terms of shame. And when you were talking about you needed a cheat sheet for emotions, I'm a business coach and executive coach, and I carry around a quad of emotions. And I also carry around the fallen firefighters framework for crisis all the way to thriving, depending on, who I'm in front of that day, or throughout that day. I may pull one or both of those out, and say, okay, where are you, on this framework? Are you straddling, struggling and surviving? Are you straddling, where are you? So they self-identify, because we're human, and executives have all kinds of crap showing up too. And then, Americans can identify 3 emotions: happy, sad, and angry. So, they need to expand their ability to identify, okay, where am I here? And I marry it up with the brain in terms of our brain science. And then what's your intention about what you want to actually summon to feel today?
Yeah. More cheat sheets.
That's, I keep printing them off.
Yes, that's a solution. More cheat sheets.
Oh, shoot. So as we're kind of wrapping this up, could you speak to the rebuilding of your family relationships? Because I think it's really important for our audience to hear the possibility and the hope embedded in this.
Absolutely. The most rewarding part. I never thought I would move back to Omaha, Nebraska. If I'm being honest, which I am, like, it's not something I wanted to do 9 months ago when my brother asked me to come home. It's not something I wanted to do. And it's something that I needed to do. And more is being revealed every day on why I needed to. But to sit with my dad in the hospital for 2 weeks in a row, every day in the ICU, and to have that conversation with him, and to be able to support him, like, I'm just so grateful, because I can't imagine. And I have a really strong group of men around me.
Yeah.
And they said, Andrew, have the conversation now, because if you don't have that conversation, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life.
Right.
So if nothing else, me coming home to have that conversation with my dad, that is good enough for me. And it's so much more than that because I get to work with my brother now. We get to work together every day. Do we fight and butt heads? Absolutely. I'm closest to him than anybody else in my life. He's somebody that I just confide in and trust more than anybody else. He's always been there for me. And getting to work with him every day and have a more intimate connection with him, to be there for my nephew this weekend, spending Mother's Day at my mom's, and our whole family's going to be there. Just this family time that, just in 2012, 2013, 14, 15, I had no relationship with any of them. I had pushed them so far away. I didn't see them. I didn't spend time with them. I remember one time my mom and dad, who hated each other because in the divorce, there was so much resentment. They actually started to become friends, rallying, coming together to support me because of my addiction. They actually came together and became friends to try to get me the help that I needed. And I remember one time they jumped on a flight, flew out to San Diego together, came to my apartment, knocked on the door, and I wouldn't let him in. And I was home. And I think about that all the time. Like my mom and dad, the people who love me the most, and they were there and I wouldn't even let them in. That's not the case anymore. I get to spend a lot of time with them and tell them every time I see them, I say, I love you, because I don't know when the last time is going to be. And I'm not willing to get a chance of having regrets. And, my mom and I have had hard conversations with some of the things that happened with her growing up, having conversations with my dad, having conversations with my brother. It's all full circle.
Yeah.
It's all come full circle. And I don't know what the future has, if my brother and I are going to continue to work together in our family business. I don't know how much longer my mom and dad have, but in this season of my life, I know I'm right where I'm supposed to be because I get to show up. You said it earlier, to love deeply.
Yeah.
And I know I'm worthy of it now. I know I'm capable of it now. I know I can give it and receive it now. And before, that wasn't the case.
Right.
And I know they feel it, and I know how much they appreciate having me home. And during this season of my life, the relationships with my family are the best they've ever been. And at the end of the day, family, it's my family are the people who've always been there for me.
Yeah. Very blessed.
Yeah. And
courageous. It's a courageous journey to do what you've done and what they've done, and to be able to mend, because obviously the deep love was always there. It was kind of in the shadows of the disease.
Yep. Now it's in the light. And by telling our loved ones that we love them all the time, like every time I see I tell my brother when I leave the office, I love you. And it's cool that we can bring it into the work environment. Telling my mom and dad that I love them, shining the light of awareness on that love. Like what a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my world, you are an example of thriving. You're bright and shiny. The lights are on. And I love this, how you describe this season of your life, and that you have shown up for it.
Thriving in the midst of chaos.
Yep. That's really the journey. And when we can do it with the people that are the dearest to us, then we can be exemplars for others who are watching.
%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
So how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out?
Positive Impact Andrew. Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram. The Andrew Schultz is my website. And there's a world famous comedian also named Andrew.
I know.
And so my last name is Schultz. And his is ULZ. So the Andrew Schultz, Schultz is mine. We're redoing my website right now. I'm really excited about the rebrand, and my girlfriend's helping me. She's done an awesome job. And
Cool.
The podcast Positive Impact with Andrew Schultz. That's my podcasts on all the podcast platforms. Those are the best ways. And I love messages. I'm very vocal and open about my recovery journey, about sobriety. And I just do that because the messages I receive in turn of just one person being inspired or empowered or feeling supported or having hope because of what they're going through, and they see what I've been through. That's why I do it. And that's why, having the opportunity to talk to you and to be on this podcast, it means so much, because there's so many people out there who are still struggling in the dark, and there's a stigma. And just, if it's one person listening who has that hope or takes that first step of courage and willingness and honesty, man, this was a success.
Great. Awesome. Well, you are a remarkable man. And I am eternally grateful to Tucker for introducing us. So keep doing what you're doing. We're changing the world.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah. Great job, and good luck on the podcast. If there's anything I can do to support you, please do not hesitate.
Absolutely. I'm there. So again, thank you. Deep gratitude.
Absolutely.
I want to thank Andrew again for being a part of the podcast today. What a remarkable man. What was truly touching about our conversation was his heartfelt willingness to share the emotionality of how two life-changing events experienced as a teen propelled him into his own addiction. His own gift of desperation that revealed his path back to healing and recovery. His destructive journey led him on his own intervention, deep struggles to know himself truly and create a life of service. It's truly inspiring. Thank you for joining us today. If you are in a space and willing to come out of the shadows of shame, stigma, guilt, desperation, we've built a membership for you. Stop navigating this journey alone. Join us at voicesencourage.com/thrive.